I think I could probably manage this room. Hi, I'm Marcia Vistrin. I'm president of the New York League of Conservation Voter Education Fund. And we're a statewide group that works to empower citizens to be effective advocates on behalf of the environment. We have a chapter here on Long Island, which is probably our strongest chapter. And we have in the room one of our board members, Barbara Glass, who tells us what to think about the issue. So one of the things we do, and we've been doing across the state, is these nonpartisan candidate forums, which really give citizens an opportunity to hear where their elected officials and individuals who want to be their elected officials think about the environmental issues they care about. And with that, I want to say that we cannot do these things unless we have extraordinary local partners. And here in Riverhead, that extraordinary partner is Bill Toder, who is the president of the North Fork Environmental Council. And with that, he's going to take things away.
Thank you for all coming. About tied with what Southold did last week in terms of attendance, so that's really good. Not trying to compete or anything, but this is a unique forum, and people seem to appreciate what we're doing here, and that is the candidates are in the room one at a time. They're going to be answering questions, the same questions, from segment to segment, so that participation by other candidates won't change their answers, that hopefully they'll be focused on the subject. Just so you know the process, all the candidates received a written questionnaire, probably I think it was late in August, and it was returned at the end of September. That questionnaire had 10 specific questions on environmental issues regarding local issues. We'll be drawing some of our questions tonight from that questionnaire. We'll be having a few others, hopefully, that we will have in addition to those. We also hope to have time to be able to open it up to questions from the audience. There are some cards out there that Josh will pass around. If you write them down, it's good for us because then it enables us to make sure we're asking the same question to each of the candidates as they come in for their segments. But you're more than welcome to, if you feel better, speaking out and standing up and asking the questions that way. We do ask that because this year we have 3 candidates allotted into our 2-hour segment, we're going to be rolling this along pretty quickly so that if we can keep applause down, if we can keep our questions short, and if I can shut up, we can get going and try to keep this on track so we can get out of here at 8 o'clock and make sure everyone has the exact same time. So with that said, the first candidate speaking tonight is Riverhead Supervisor Sean Walter, and we welcome him here and thank him for coming.
Well, thank you. I'm a little bit nervous when Bill is sort of the moderator because on more than one occasion Bill has sent a dunning letter about something or another that he might not have appreciated in the town, but we always try to do our best with the environmental community. There's only, or the environment, period. There's only one person in this room that probably would know this, and I've said it before. All I ever wanted to be was a park ranger when I grew up. I went to community college, and then I went to Binghamton, and I was going to go to environmental science forestry school to become a park ranger. That's what I wanted to do. And so they wanted to make me a paper chemist, and I said, forget that, I don't want to be a paper chemist. Blah. I went to Binghamton and got an environmental science degree, and so by God's good graces, here I am as supervisor. I'm not quite sure how that happened. So I want to talk to you about my environmental record, and I don't take credit for these things, but I'll take credit for the things that I've done. The first thing, let's talk about sewage treatment. Everybody can talk about groundwater pollution. Everybody can talk about nitrogen in the water. This town is doing something about it, and it's doing something about it because the things that were started, Rose Sanders and Barbara Glass as councilwomen. The town of Riverhead is and George Bartnick. The town of Riverhead is upgrading its sewage treatment plant. We are going to go from a sequencing batch reactor sewage treatment plant to a biomembrane filtration plant, which will take out another 75% of the nitrogen that we discharge in the bay. That is huge. What did I do? I worked very hard to get an $8 million grant from Steve Ballone to make that a reality. What did I do? I worked very hard to get sewer stabilization funds so that the tax rates of the Riverhead Sewer District won't go up beyond 3%. That's huge. But it started under 3 council people that were here. I delivered that. Town of Riverhead's Calverton sewage treatment plant. Secondary treatment plant, no nitrogen removal, built in the 1970s. I'll stop walking, Denise. Discharges into McKay Lake. I don't know why people fish in McKay Lake, but they fish in McKay Lake. It's rich in nutrients. We obtained, through a lot of trips to Albany, almost $8 million in grant funds from the state of New York to upgrade that sewage treatment plant from a secondary treatment plant to a tertiary treatment plant and move the discharge north of the groundwater divide. What did I do? I got the money. What did the 3 council people do that are sitting in the audience? They set the plate. They set the stage for me to get the money. Map and plan is done. So the final thing is I only have 3 minutes. I'm sure I'm probably over it. Calverton, EPCAL. We have 2,100 acres left to subdivide. We worked with the environmental community, although Bill Fodor got mad at me, sent me a couple of those letters that maybe I didn't work his group as much. But we worked with the environmental community to subdivide out 600 acres and preserve 60% of EPCAL as a forever wild place. Forever. And we will preserve it for the birds and the bees and everybody while still maintaining 600 acres of developable land. We did that as a town board. And what did we do as a town board? And what did the environmental community help us with? You might read some stuff about Illuminati. Denise Civiletti posited a few companies that who Illuminati may be. But it's going to knock your socks off. What we did as a community and this town board to create an environmental preserve and jobs that Long Island has not seen since Northrop Grumman left, all while preserving the environment. And that, my friends, is good business. So that's my opening statement. Questions?
Great. We'll start with this one.
Oh, wait a minute. I sold my 1997 F-350 crew cab that got 8 to 10 miles to the gallon yesterday.
Wow.
That should give me something, right? George, you should be happy.
Are you going to bicycle then? That would make it really.
Did you get a Tesla?
Question number 1. Concern for the quality of ground and surface water continues to be the #1 issue for the East End, with nitrogen identified as the most significant pollutant emanating from failing outdated septic systems. Pesticide and fertilizer use by public and the towns is also a contributing factor. Even land use decisions on and near sensitive habitat contributes to the problem. Although each town remains responsible for actions within its boundaries, clearly a collaborative effort could be the most effective in addressing the health of our shared resources. The question is, what will you do to address septic issues and to reduce use of fertilizers and pesticides by the public in and by the town of Riverhead? And how do you propose to engage the East End towns to collectively address this water quality issue?
You know, I didn't really think about it, but as you were saying the question, because I've really spoken out against people that fertilize their lawns that live on the riverfront, Peconic Bay. It shouldn't happen. If you live on the bay, you should not fertilize your lawns because that just washes out into the bay. But you've touched on something. We should not be fertilizing our property on the Peconic River. And should I get reelected, it's not going to be as green as it is right now, because I'm going to stop doing that. Because you're right, Bill, there's no reason, you know, from a town standpoint, that we shouldn't be doing the same thing. What are we doing, besides after the fish kill, cleaning up the fish kill? we have embarked on a plan with the DEC. They actually called us and said, listen, we can't tell you you're going to get a grant, but we want you to apply for this grant to start talking about sewering. It is my goal to sewer south of Peconic Bay Boulevard. Sorry, Barbara and Rose, it's going to cost you a little bit. South of Peconic Bay Boulevard all the way to the Jamesport Laurel line. And what does that look like? Well, that probably, I'm not quite sure whether that's going to look like a series of package plants. We don't have to study this anymore. There's no reason to study this anymore. There's no reason to talk about this anymore. It needs to happen. So we've applied for this grant. We will start in one or two of the communities. I think we'll get the grants, a $50,000 grant. We'll start in one of the two of the communities south of Peconic Bay Boulevard and look at it for the inclusion into our sewer district or into a package plant. And so the H2M is already, there are engineers for the sewer district, we're already talking about what does it look like? Does it look like a series of package plants? It's never going to work, and I'll tell you this right now, my opinion, if we're going to try to do individual on-site denitrification sewage treatment systems. And it's not going to work because in this town where your average house sale is like $350,000, nobody can afford a $25,000, $30,000 sewage treatment plant. They can't. So you need the economy of scale. So the economy of scale is either going to be plants for communities like Huckabee, where the town will dictate you are a sewer district now, and you will pay these sewer taxes. That's coming from a conservative. And we will hook you up to a treatment system because it has to happen. I've said this not too long ago in a forum. I own a house upstate New York. I own two houses upstate New York. Both of them are hooked to the sewage treatment plant. One of them so it doesn't pollute the Susquehanna River, and the other so it doesn't pollute Lake George. I really don't understand how the heck we're so far behind the 8 ball with sewage treatment plants. I've actually gone as far, and people will say I'm nuts, to have conversations with Scott Russell about a number of things, including maybe there's some consolidation that should happen with the town of Riverhead and Southold again, but possibly putting that sewage treatment plant in Laurel, so maybe we pump it in that direction as opposed to upland. So you have my word, south of Peconic Bay Boulevard, definitely sewering. I'm working with Sarah Lansdale with the county. They're going to look at trying to sewer some stuff west of town, some of the mobile home communities on the Peconic Bay. So the other thing, this is a long answer, sorry. The other thing is the CPF fund is the only avenue that you could ever get money from to help residents pay for sewage treatment plants. If you go to upstate, I don't know, keep looking at you. If you go to upstate New York, in the Catskills, you can get a sewage treatment plant, I think it's 80 or 90% funded from the city of New York. If we could do that here, people might actually put the new systems in. The only money that's available for that would be the CPF funds. Barbara had it right, we should share the CPF funds across the East End, not just Riverhead's paltry amount. But what we're going to do, we have special state legislation in, it was passed by the Senate. Fred Thiel said it should be passed by the Assembly. Anthony Colombo says the same thing next year, to allow the town of Riverhead to refinance its CPF debt. And once we refinance that CPF debt, we should be able to make our debt service payments and maybe have a little money left over for the things we're talking about.
That leads into the second question pretty perfectly. Riverhead sewage treatment plant and scavenger waste plant serve as the regional treatment facilities receiving waste from other towns, the Suffolk County Center and the county jail. Riverhead continues to comply with costly state Department of Environmental Conservation mandated upgrades. Beginning in 2016, the facility will divert approximately 30% of its effluent to irrigate the Indian Island Golf Course. The use of this effluent as irrigation reduces output to the estuary and in the long term will reduce the amount of fertilizer input on the golf course and reduces the need for the course to pump over 60 million gallons of water each year. Although the town continues to operate this facility responsibly and employs creative techniques to improve the health of our surface water, the sewage treatment plant remains an easy scapegoat for others as being a primary source of nitrogen pollution and nitrogen loading. As the host, the question is, as the host community for this regional treatment plant, do you believe Riverhead should re-examine the rate structure of its treatment plant so the current users and any expansion of the Riverhead sewer system pay their fair share to expand reuse options and improve the Paconic's water quality? At the same time, what steps will you take to ensure that any sewer extensions do not threaten the loss of open space and critical habitat to development, as well as increase overall nitrogen loading, thereby reversing the gains?
Okay, yes. You can answer that by yes, but here's how, Bill, here's how you do it. The first thing the town of Riverhead did, scavenger waste plant. Scavenger waste plant, if you were only less than 25% of the scavenger waste plant, not effluent, influent, comes from Riverhead. The rest of it comes from the east end, the bulk of it, 50% comes from Southampton, 20-some-odd% comes from East Hampton. We do about 20%, I think Southold does about 10, maybe 15%, it all adds up to 100% for a lawyer. So, we removed the scavenger waste fee on people's tax bill in Riverhead. It was the most ridiculous thing. In Riverhead, you had to pay the same tipping fee the Southampton person had to pay, but you had to pay a scavenger waste fee, so we eliminated that fee. We increased the cost of the scavenger waste plant's tipping fee. We did that knowing that I think we're at $1.12 per 100 now. I think that's where $1.12 per 100. And I may have it wrong, but we're higher than Bergen Point. So what we had to do with the scavenger waste, we had our initial conversations were with Bill Wilkinson and now with, my goodness, Supervisor Cantwell, Larry Cantwell, about them keeping their scavenger waste plant or building a new one. And we said, listen, we're keeping this open. We're not getting rid of it. It has to stay open. It is an east, and Bergen Point doesn't want the effluent. They can't take it, influent. So we increased the tipping fees to keep it so the plant can pay its way while not burdening the town of Riverhead. So right now the scavenger waste plant in the summertime is pretty much at capacity. We should meet our expenses with the tipping fees that we've put in place, and we clearly haven't chased any scavenger waste out. We will continue to be the regional scavenger waste plant. There's no change in that. I've spoken to Southampton about extending our sewage treatment plant into Southampton, at least around the traffic circle. Now that's a taboo. I got in a lot of trouble for that. But what I said to the folks over in Southampton, the town board, is that we would have to sit in Southampton as the town board over the sewage treatment plant. In other words, our board would sit over the Southampton town line and be the board that runs the sewage treatment plant. They said taxation without representation. I said, that's fine, whatever. But we're willing to have that conversation. I had the conversation with Scott Russell. But here's the key. And here's the key that nobody's been able to break through. Let me back up. Roughly 20-25% of our flow comes from the jail. They only pay 17 or 18% of our costs. That's a little out of whack. So we got to use that to help Steve Ballone get us the $8 million grant. But then I went further. I wasn't happy with the $8 million grant. Something called sewer stabilization funds. We get very little sewer stabilization funds. So we did all the legal research. We did a spreadsheet half the size of that wall right there to come up with exactly what the rates in Riverhead should be compared to the sewer stabilization rates of the rest of the county sewer districts. And we just sent a letter to the county's engineer, sewer engineer, I don't remember his name, I just signed the letter, basically telling him we're going to raise our rates to 3%, and the county has to be responsible for anything above the 3% coming from their scavenger waste income. We think we're going to get it. Steve Ballone seems favorable. Everyone seems favorable. For that, this town has to be willing, within its capacity limits, to connect that sewage treatment plant to places it needs to be connected. Southampton could be one. So we're doing exactly what you said. I should have stopped at yes.
Which brings us into our next segment. Just yes or no answers to the following 3 quick questions. Do you support the proposed amendment to the Community Preservation Fund, which would allow up to
Yes.
20% collected monies to be used for water quality issues? Would you support the resubmission of an application to New York State for the designation of Main Road from 105 to the east as a rural corridor?
I'm not sure what that's not the historic designation, that's the,
It's a designation of a historic region, but not a landmark preservation.
okay, I have to look at that more, because here's the thing, we did the landmark, we made our downtown, Richard Wines worked with us to make our downtown a historic downtown. Well, we just found out that SHPO won't let us take down the old Sears building because they think it's historic. And if anybody's looked at the Sears building, I think a lot of us could agree that should just be taken down. And so I don't have an answer for that, because I have to look, everyone says it doesn't mean anything, and then we do it, and now we have a block in the largest block of Riverhead that's vacant, to which we thought we could tear it all down and build new buildings, make them look like historic buildings. We were just told we can't take them down.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer for that one.
Okay. Would you introduce legislation which would phase out single-use plastic bags in the town of Riverhead? Yes or no?
I'm sorry, Carol.
If you have questions, you can pass them to the end, so we can collect those.
We need a card.
Do one more from here, and then we'll take some audience questions. Our coastlines are facing increasing pressures from both nature in the form of rising sea level of up to 10 inches by as early as 2020, an increase in the number and strength of storms, and from people in the form of increased nitrogen load, shoreline hardening structures, illegal clearing of wetlands, and building too close or even within sensitive coastal areas. As a result, inland flooding from storm surges and heavy rain events have led to costly and dangerous flooding conditions. The question is, what steps will you take to address these coastal issues to protect our shore and inland properties, as well as our marine ecosystems and their role in protecting our shores? Would you join most of our other East End towns and commit to completing and adopting a local waterfront revitalization plan?
I say yes, but I haven't seen the local waterfront revitalization plan. I think the devil's in the details. I agree with everything, storm hardening, sure, you shouldn't, listen, you should probably live on Creek Road, you shouldn't live on the Barrier Islands, you probably shouldn't live at the edge of these bluffs all throughout Riverhead and Long Island. And if you're going to live there, you better understand that eventually your house falls in and that's the end of it, because that's the way nature works. So everything you're talking about, I support. Hardening the shoreline someplace is taking it away from someplace else. Putting jetties and groins in, create great beaches in some locations and poor beaches in others. The devil's in the details. I would say yes, I would support the effort, but I'd want to see what the effort, ultimately the results of that study show or that plan shows.
Okay. You have any cards to pass up? No one? I have one card here. This was a topic last year, but the question is, where do you stand on flyboarding in the Peconic?
It was a stupid idea. I don't think people understand. I'm a boater. I do some fishing, not too much, but I'm a boater. The flyboarding was a really dumb idea. It should not have happened at the Peconic River for a lot of reasons. One, the river's not deep enough. But the other thing is, when you are putting that sort of propulsion directly down into the water column, you are stirring up all the sediment in the bottom of the, well, in our case, it was the river. Now, I'm not going to say that there's polluted sediment down there, because nothing would be polluted in the town of Riverhead. But stirring up all that sediment, polluted or not, is going to create a situation that makes it uninhabitable for microorganisms, because one, you're eliminating the light, you're eliminating the oxygen, you're creating turbidity that fish and other things are not going to be able to survive in. So that flyboarding should not have happened. I'm very happy it's in Port Jefferson. Anybody here from Port Jefferson? No, actually, they go to Greenport or Port Jefferson? I don't know. Port Jefferson. Very happy to have them in Port Jefferson. It's a much deeper harbor. And you're not going to stir up the sediment, and you might not kill somebody when he falls, face gets stuck in his neck into the mud, because it's pretty muddy there.
Okay, next question is, in a town where a significant number of acres of land is cleared for agricultural use, clear cutting of vegetation remains a relatively unchecked activity, whether removal of canopy of trees along the public right-of-way, or removal of diseased specimens, or removal of otherwise healthy trees to make way for development. There's very little attention given to the protection of this critical component of our local ecology, especially when native plants and trees are cleared, which only help invasives take a stronger hold. The question is, do you believe that vegetation protection beyond that which is regulated through the DEC and the CAC regulations is necessary? And if so, what would you propose to effectuate such protection?
Yes, and yes. Have you seen my house? I have no grass, and even my loft, this has been taken over by maple trees. I had asked Jeff Murphy, and honestly, it's my fault because I didn't follow up on it, but it's really my fault because unfortunately, given the financial circumstances of the town, we have downsized, downsized, and downsized. I guess the theory is do more with less until you can do everything with nothing. So we're unfortunately at the point in our planning department where there's a lot of things that I'd like to see done, and we just haven't had the time to do. And I asked Jeff Murphy, and he started to work on it, but now he's kind of a site plan reviewer, to create legislation to protect the trees. Barbara, I don't know how you and I see eye to eye on some of these things. This is something that Barbara had put forth a while ago in subdivision. She's scratching her head like, how did this happen? But the reality is when we do subdivisions, we should have tree ordinances and not allow them to clear cut the subdivisions. And you know what, should I get reelected, you have my word that that legislation will get put forward. And it really is a function of Jeff started it, but then there's just so many things that he has to get done, and it just hasn't get done. But you have my word that that will be something that gets put in place. I believe in that 100%.
And I'm going to combine an audience question with one that we have here along the same lines. Is 7 Suffolk towns in the county itself have pledged and committed to take action under the New York State Climate Smart Communities Initiative, and several have drafted climate action plans to address climate impacts. The town of East Hampton has also set aggressive goals to reduce energy waste and meet community-wide electric consumption 100% from renewable energy sources like solar and wind as soon as 2020. The question is, if elected, would you join such an effort and support meaningful policies and actions to allow the community and town government to achieve such transforming goals, thereby reducing CO2 emissions and other pollutants? And would you thus not grant a permit to any new fossil fuel-driven peaker plant in Riverhead?
You know, it's interesting because we're probably the first leading right now the East End in solar farms. And so I'm going to put this question out to you. And because this is what the residents have to answer. This is not for me to answer. And I feel very strongly about, you know, the solar. It's a good thing. It's a good thing on rooftops. It's a good thing on buildings. But we just converted a 40-acre farm, took it out of agricultural production and put it into solar. We converted another 40-acre farm, took it out of agricultural production, put it into solar. I was in Mount St. Mary's, my son was looking at a college there, and we're looking at this beautiful view, and I'm like, what the hell is that? So we drive down and look at it. Beautiful farm view, green grass, rolling meadows. It had to be 100 acres of solar taken out of agricultural production. So I'm not going to give you an answer because I think Long Island has to answer this question for itself. Is solar so critical that when we have such a small land base that we are willing to take out significant portions of agriculturally productive property and put it into solar? And I'm going to follow that on. I have been to the, and I'm not going to take a position because it's a question you have to answer as environmentalist. I have been to the Caithness facility. I've been to several of the other LIPO plants. And when you look at the Caithness facility and you look at the fact that it is run by natural gas and on a winter day, provides at least 10% of all of Long Island's power on a 20-acre parcel. These are questions you, as a community, have to answer. Because there's a lot of public outcry now against all of these solar farms. You only had to look at Ed Romaine, who's probably much, he's touted as an environmentalist, and a lot of people came out against these solar farms. So I'm not going to give you an answer, because I have an opinion about taking prime agricultural farmland and turn it into solar. But this is a question that Long Island has to answer. We don't have a lot of space left.
Okay, a follow-up to that quickly is, would you support the reform of the tower law to allow for more wind power?
We tried to do a windmill. Honestly, we spent $70,000 or $80,000 to build a windmill. Michael Reichel, who's is a visionary man beyond his time with so many things, and he tried to convince the town board to build a windmill right down here on River Road or Riverside. And, we were almost there, and we didn't even get to the public hearing part. And the reason that we stopped, I think the offshore wind is a great idea, but for the municipality to build the windmill, we kind of felt that the payback period, the best case scenario was 15 years. And while I did keep my truck 19 years, I kind of feel like 20 years is a useful life of a mechanical piece of equipment. And we felt 15 years payback period, and we'd only have it for 5 more years of its useful life. We stopped the project. I support the offshore wind. I support the offshore wind that kind of got zonked recently. I think it's a great idea. But and I drove with Michael Reichel all over the Northeast looking. I don't know how many people in this room have looked at windmills, but I've been all over the Northeast in New Jersey looking at windmills, listening to them, trying to understand what they mean. There's not a good fit for them on Long Island. Out in the ocean, 100%, we should be doing it.
Another quick follow-up. Would you be supportive of the town researching municipal buildings and municipal land for use of solar, such as the dump, other buildings, rather than taking farmland out of?
Dumps. We have the EPCAL, we have a contract right now that will yield anywhere from, on the low end, $500,000 a year to almost $750,000 a year for a solar. We have a 100-acre, George Gabrielson, this was his brainchild. We have 100 acres of an energy park, and we are going to do at least 40 to 60 acres of solar. Until Illuminati came, we were talking about putting solar on some of our runways, but wait till you see what Illuminati is. Oh, yeah, it's a solar-powered unmanned aerial aircraft. You're not allowed to call it drone. UAV. So we are doing that, and we have a contract with somebody for our landfill. So assuming the LIPA gets out of their own way and builds some transfer stations, when they do that, we will have these projects connected. So 100%.
Okay. How can the town better dispose of its municipal solid waste, for example, perhaps a waste-to-energy plant, and improve recycling, possibly switching to single stream?
I think the single streams idea has merit. Ed Romaine and I discussed it when they went to single stream recycling, and at the time the town was getting paid for its recyclables, and Ed the town of Brookhaven would take them for free, so we didn't want to lose out on the revenue stream because we do use it. It's not a lot of money, but several $1,000s a year. But I think when we rebid our garbage contract, which will happen next year, we'll bid it 2 ways. Either single stream or the way we do it now, paper and then commingle. So we'll bid it both ways and see what happens with it. If you want to, if everyone lived like me in a 1,300 square foot house, didn't water the lawn and lived in the woods, you would. My family of 5 throws 1 garbage pail out a week. And I'm not saying I'm some environmentalist, but I reuse my plastic bags. We reuse a lot of things. I burn wood to heat my house. I don't recommend it for everybody, but even though I joke around about my carbon footprint, I probably have, and I sold the F-350. Now I have one of the smaller carbon footprints. But I think it's people like this young man has to make that decision, not to burn wood. It's not so bad, there's a lot of audience. But people like this young man here, they have to make that decision that they're not gonna live in a 5,000 square foot house that has to have all the bells and whistles. I think he probably has a swimming pool. Swimming pool and all the other stuff. You know, it's a way of life, and unfortunately, some people haven't bought into that way of life. Dick Amper has. I've been to his house multiple times, so kudos to him.
Last quick question from the audience, I want to make sure I get them all in, and want to save time for your summary, is recently there was a case of dumping of asbestos over at EPCAL, and the question is, who is responsible and what can we do to prevent such episodes in the future in other town properties?
Well, that was a stupid decision about, shouldn't have happened. The town board, Councilwoman Giglio decided that she was going to get some material for free to build the bike path. Worked with the highway superintendent. The town board said, before you do anything, make sure you go through the DEC to make sure this material was acceptable. And it turns out, before that conversation was had with the town board, that material had already been dumped on the active runway. We had the conversation, we said go to the DEC, get permission to use this material on the bike path, because we've had a lot of problems with the bike path, and it goes through some pretty sensitive areas. I have a department head meeting every Monday, and one of the department head meeting, a town engineer said, what are we doing with that stuff dumped on the runway? I said, what stuff dumped on the runway? So we went out and looked at it. It was taken from an unpermitted facility. At the same time, we had the Roberto Clemente Park incident. I immediately called the DEC, let them know. They actually sent a notice of violation to the town. We retained the environmental consultant. We tested it. It was contaminated, but not like Clemente Park. Had some pesticides. It's old. It probably is old fill. Old fill. Jill, tell me if I'm wrong. When they used to collapse the old houses in the city, historic fill. They collapsed the houses in the city. They would fill the holes in it with the historic fill, and then when they build new buildings, they got to get all that junk out of there. That's probably what it was. But it failed for some pesticides, not high enough that we had to transport it off Long Island, and we took it to Brookhaven landfill. You know, sometimes people do bad acts, and it was never permitted from the town board. It never should have been dumped there. The town board said, go through the DEC. That didn't happen. Somewhere along the line, the highway superintendent got blamed for it. I don't think it was the highway superintendent's responsibility. But we took care of it, and there were no issues, and we didn't use any of the material. And then we went, the highway superintendent did take some of this material from the same location. We sampled all of that, and that material didn't have any contamination. DEC said he could use that material. So the moral of the story is, it's very rare that you get something for free that's any good.
You want to provide your summary comments?
I'm just going to say I want to thank you very much for having me come out here. You know what? I think I look at my track record as an environmentalist. I can't even believe myself. I used to tell people I'm a conservationist along the Teddy. I'm a conservationist along the lines of Teddy Roosevelt. I think I've got a pretty good track record. I think I've been pretty open to the things that the environmental community have asked of me and of the town. And I think we've responded accordingly in a very positive way. And I think the biggest thing that we've done, but for Bill's letter on EPCAL, we really listened to the community to subdivide that property at EPCAL. And I think that if I'm fortunate enough to get your endorsement and re-elected, I will continue that open dialogue. I honestly love nothing more than the dialogue between communities, environmental communities, civic organizations. It doesn't matter. Because in that debate, not only can debate be morally stimulating, that's not really right, stimulating, but great ideas come out of those debates. And I think the debates that I've had with the environmental community have made this town a much better place. And it's something that I said to Denise today when she interviewed me for this vignette she's doing. And I said, we used to be known as a little town that couldn't. You never hear that anymore. There's so many exciting things happening right now. And yet we've done some great things with the sewage treatment. We didn't talk about our water well treatment, our groundwater systems, solar we did touch on. We've done so many great things and preserved the environment and worked together. And I look forward to doing the same over hopefully the next 2 years. So thank you very much. And God bless.
One thing I didn't mention that I want to make clear that all the questions that I'm reading tonight come from a coalition of Riverhead civic groups and environmental groups. So it's not just the NFPC, and I'm not spouting my questions, but these are groups from the Riverhead Coalition that Barbara and I have talked to, people we've taken questions from, and put this together for you tonight. So, our next guest is the Democratic candidate, Anthony Coates. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, how are you? We'll have a couple of minutes for your opening remarks.
I just saw Sean outside, and I decided I would take his notes, and I would just hold them up to a mirror and say the opposite of everything you just said. Thanks for having me. I am the candidate who has not been on the town board for the last 6 years, so let me take a moment and introduce myself. I'm Anthony Coates. I'm a registered investment advisor. Hello, Michael. And I live on Roanoke Avenue. I'm running for this office because I believe that Riverhead needs a fresh start. Here, we have the lowest bond rating of any town in the county. We're Suffolk's most indebted town. We pay the highest taxes of any town on the East End. And while property values are rising all around us, they're falling here. Now tonight, we're here to talk about the environment. But as you and I well know, the environment and our economy are inextricably intertwined. The environment is what sustains us, it enriches us, it's why we're here. In Sean and Jodi's Riverhead, I don't believe the environment has been a big priority. The mantra here in Riverhead has been build, baby, build. But we haven't built smart, which has hurt our economy, which in turn has hurt our CPF, which in turn has put pressure on our environment. I don't think that this town board or my opponents get that connection. I don't think they get that this is all intertwined, that one puts pressure on the other, and that Riverhead's bulldozer-driven economics don't make sense. It's about where it should be, smart growth and a sustainable environment. Our sewers here cannot keep up. We're choking in traffic. We have a ticking time bomb at Northville. We've completely mishandled land preservation. The fish kill in our bay and in our river ought to be a wake-up call that we're not living in balance or doing this right. Our zoning and planning boards continue to approve one bad project after the other because we haven't revisited our master plan in better than a decade. And smart developers have figured out how to build a shopping center in the parking lot of a shopping center. And while Sean and Jodi have fiddled and fought, they've stripped our planning department down to bare bones. I shudder to think what it's going to look like when we attempt to develop EPCAL. I'm running against a permit expediter who won't tell you who her clients are and is well funded by Up Island developers, and a man who doesn't believe in global warming. This town needs a proactive watchdog. It needs eyes and ears that will stop the sand mining that creeps into every project around town. We need a town board that understands green technology and farm sustainability. We need a town board that gets ag plan districts. We need to rethink transportation, and all of these issues we needed to do yesterday. From the bottle bill to Broadwater, I fought to preserve our precious environment. If I'm lucky enough to be your supervisor, I'll deliver a Riverhead that will be proud to pass to our children. So I thank you for having me tonight. Any questions you may have?
First question. Concern for the quality of groundwater and surface water continues to be the #1 issue for the East End, with nitrogen identified as the most significant pollutant emanating from failing and outdated septic systems. Pesticide and fertilizer use by the public and towns is also a contributing factor. Even land use decisions on and near sensitive habitat contributes to the problem. Although each town remains responsible for actions within its boundaries, clearly a collaborative effort could be most effective in addressing the health of our shared resources. The question is, what will you do to address septic issues and to reduce the use of fertilizers and pesticides by the public in and by the town of Riverhead? And how do you propose to engage the East End towns to collectively address the water quality issue?
That was a well-phrased and spontaneous question. I think it comes down to human behavior, and there's a number of prongs to it. About 80% of the nitrogen that's generated, I've read, emanates from the household. And so I think we need to take a number of prongs to it. Number one, we need to encourage best behavior. Let's take it first at the farm level. We need to encourage best behavior. We need to educate on what the best practices are. And we need to do that at the homeowner level too. There are various septic upgrades that are sitting in the county Department of Health that I think I would prod as a supervisor to get the county to approve. But it comes with changing septic systems and cesspools at the home level. We need to do that. We need to come up with a system of tax incentives or tax credits that will allow people as homes pass or in the here and now to pump out, to clean up, and to change what they use to treat waste at home. It doesn't have to be onerous. It could be something that we phase in. I think it's most of it revolves around education and changing behavior. Also, we'll need to sewer in some places, but sewers sounds good, and it's always a out in the distance answer. Sewers also set up a warning bell that developers or crafty developers will come behind and try and up density. So if we do sewer, we need to make sure that we advertise well ahead that this does not mean an increase in density, so the proper zoning has to be in place, the master plan has to be in place, and where we can, we'll raise money to get sewers. So it's a multi-pronged approach. I think it starts with changing best practices.
Okay. Next question follows into your answers. Riverhead Sewage Treatment Plant and Scavenger Waste Plant serve as regional treatment facilities receiving waste from other towns, from Suffolk County Center and from the county jail. Riverhead continues to comply with costly State Department of Environmental Conservation mandated upgrades. Beginning in 2016, the facility will divert approximately 30% of its effluent to irrigate the Indian Island Golf Course. The reuse of this effluent as irrigation reduces the output to the estuary and long-term reduces the amount of fertilizer put on the golf course and reduces the need for the course to pump over 60 million gallons of water each year. Although the town continues to operate this facility responsibly and employs creative techniques to improve the health of our surface waters, it remains an easy scapegoat for others as being a primary source of nitrogen loading. The question, and a long question as people will laugh behind me, is, as the host community for this regional treatment plant, do you believe Riverhead should re-examine the rate structure for its STP so that current users and any expansion of the system pay their fair share and to expand the reuse options and to improve the Connex water quality? And at the same time, what steps will you take to ensure that any sewer extensions do not threaten the loss of open space or critical habitat?
Well, my mom taught me that when somebody says, do I think people should pay their fair share in the body of a question, I should say, yes, people should pay their fair share. So yes, people should pay their fair share. In terms of, I alluded to it in my other answer, which is that whenever you talk about creating new sewer systems, as I said, we have crafty developers that have come behind and created shopping centers within shopping centers. Those are the same people that will be poised to trail right behind increases in sewage or sewering to say, well, now there's more density. It comes with the town following its master plan. We haven't done that. We haven't revisited that. And so you, as a town board and as a supervisor, have to make damn sure that you've tightened up all of the loopholes for anyone who would come behind and attempt to overdevelop against your master plan because you've upped sewers. So I think what you do is that you make sure that you have very tight land use parameters for anyone that would make mischief behind an increase in sewage.
Okay. Some quick yes and no questions, kind of break the speed here a little bit. Do you support the proposed amendment to the Community Preservation Fund, which would allow up to 20% of collected monies to be used for water quality issues?
Yes.
Would you support the resubmission of an application to
Yes.
New York State for designation of Main Road from Route 105 to the east as a rural corridor?
Yes.
And would you introduce legislation which would phase out single-use plastic bags in the town of Riverhead?
As a guy who just took a sip out of a plastic water bottle and rued the day as I came here, and I was like, Bill, we've got to bring something. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. Next question. Our coastlines are facing increasing pressures from both nature in the form of rising sea level of up to 10 inches by as early as 2020, an increase in the number and strength of storms, and from people in the form of increased nitrogen loading, shoreline hardening structures, illegal clearing of wetlands, and building too close or even within sensitive coastal areas. As a result, inland flooding from storm surges and heavy rain events have led to costly and dangerous flooding conditions. The question is, what steps will you take to address these coastal issues to protect our shores and inland properties, as well as marine ecosystems and their role in protecting our shores? Would you join most of our East End towns and commit to completing and adopting a local waterfront revitalization plan?
As someone, Cleo's in the second row, we got battered and bashed in Sandy like a lot of people did. I support the governor's resiliency program, and I support increased plantings. I think that's a natural way to ameliorate the problem and to stop a lot of the problem before it happens. I think that that's true of not only storm surges like Sandy, but it's true of rise in tide due to global warming. I think that would make us much better equipped to handle those kind of events in the future. I think it would be a preventative for events that come our way. I strongly support joining with the other East End towns. This is something that is regional in nature. We sit right at the border of two towns. It would be silly on something like this to ignore a regional approach. So yes, I would absolutely participate with our neighbors.
Okay. I had a question from the audience before. Where do you stand? This is an issue that came up last year, but is active in other parts of Long Island. Where do you stand on the flyboarding in the Peconic?
Get my jams on. You know, let me say something as an aside first. With all of the problems, economic and environmental and all of the rest, this town board, the most three talked about topics this year were medical marijuana, flyboarding, and beer bracelets for festivals around town. That's a really pathetic track record. We have such, we're the most indebted, the highest tax, the lowest bond rated town, and that's what we spend our time talking about. The answer is that I'm dead set against flyboarding next to the estuary. I think that we wouldn't have even been talking about this had it been brought by a different individual or a different group. And I'm embarrassed that we've spent so much time talking about it.
Okay. Next question. In a town where a significant number of acres of land is cleared for agricultural use, clear cutting of vegetation remains a relatively unchecked activity. Whether removal of a canopy of trees along public rights of way, other than diseased specimens, or removal of other otherwise healthy trees to make way for development, There is very little attention given to the protection of this critical component of our local ecology, especially when native plants and trees are cleared, which only help invasives take a stronger hold. The question is, do you believe that vegetation protection beyond what is regulated through the DEC and the Riverhead CAC regulations is necessary? If so, what would you propose to effectuate such protection? Would you propose a tree revegetation or tree replanting program?
It's a tremendous problem. We've had folks clear cut with impunity here around town. Keep in mind that a living example is the tree clearing that was done by the developer at the Costco site, who, I'll say that I was at a town board meeting the other day with my running mates, and we sat there while they went over a Chapter 90 to allow Costco to sell Christmas trees. Now, Costco hasn't replanted the trees that are already supposed to be replanted. So Costco doesn't even have a CO for the building they're in. And we're allowing them to sell Christmas trees. It would be a much smarter idea if the town held their feet to the fire and had them replant those Christmas trees where they're supposed to plant. So BJ's, in their infinite wisdom, saw that there were no teeth in our mouth, and so they then tore down their trees. And last I looked today, they haven't replanted trees. So, people get the impression that you're just not serious about following the rules, and like my kids, they'll violate the rules left and right if you allow them to. We've allowed that to happen. I wouldn't permit that as supervisor. To answer your question, I favor dealing with it at the outset. I'd rather have trees of this that were indigenous and were there in the first place, and then have to go back and replant trees. So I think that part of site plan approval should be a much tighter way of keeping the trees that are at sites there, being sensitive to the plantings, and if we can't accomplish that, increasing plantings as part of the site plan. So I think that's how you deal with it. You deal with it on the approval of each application.
Okay. Next question is a combination of a audience question and ours, and that is, 7 Suffolk towns in the county itself have pledged and committed to take action under the New York State Climate Smart Communities Initiative, and several have drafted climate action plans to address climate impacts. The town of East Hampton has also set aggressive goals to reduce energy waste and meet community-wide electricity consumption 100% from renewable energy sources like solar and wind power as soon as the year 2020. The question is, if elected, will you join such efforts and support meaningful policies and actions to allow the community and town government to achieve such transformative goals, thereby reducing carbon dioxide emissions and other pollutants? And would you thus not grant permit to any new fossil fuel-driven peaker plants in Riverhead?
Back in Southall. The answer is yes, is that I said in my opening statement is that we just don't adhere to scientific reality in this town. And so, yes, I'd work with my neighbors. I'd work, again, on a regional approach to solving these issues. And so I know, I want to do your question justice. I know it was a long question, but the answer is yes.
Okay. These questions come from the audience and has to do with a variety of issues. This one is, there was concern about agricultural land being used for solar arrays, and the question was, why isn't the old town dump and other municipal buildings being leased for solar, or at least a town study looking into other municipal properties that could be used for solar arrays rather than farmland?
That is a very good question. The first thing we did when my teammates and I got the nomination was to come up with what we called a fresh start platform for Riverhead. And a big part of that is that we have the behemoth of property up at EPCAL, And why isn't a big chunk of that a solar farm? There have been transactions that have been on the supervisor's desk and considered by the town board